Mummies, wolves, Vince Vaughn. It takes a lot to scare people these days, and a horror movie rarely makes for a guaranteed hit. Of course, it doesn't help if you break the bank making it. Tom Cruise is one of the most reliable box office draws working today, but it turns out his formidable star power isn't always enough to turn a profit. In 2017, Cruise starred in a reboot of Universal's iconic Mummy franchise. It seems like a smart bet too. In the movie, Cruise plays Nick Morton, an army sergeant who plunders ancient treasures and sells them for cash. During their travels, Nick and his partner accidentally awaken a powerful ancient Egyptian princess. Looking at the box office numbers for the film, it might seem like The Mummy made a good deal of money, earning over $400 million at the international box office on a budget of $125 million. But those numbers don't tell the full story. According to Deadline, the movie may have actually lost Universal $95 million. That's because, while the film's budget was $125 million, the total production investment was around $345 million, covering production, prints, marketing, and more. In short, The Mummy marked a huge loss for the studio. You'd be forgiven for never having heard of the 2010 Wolfman movie, because it seems to have left basically no mark on the culture at large. The film is a remake of the 1941 picture The Wolfman, and it stars Benicio del Toro as Lawrence Talbot, an aristocrat who returns to his ancestral home after hearing word that his brother has gone missing. Lawrence soon reunites with his father, Sir John, who may hold the key to some deadly family secrets. Wolf stuff ensues. With an enormous budget of $150 million, the film wasn't able to recoup enough money at the box office, earning only $139 million worldwide. Like many movie flops, the film experienced numerous production troubles. Mark Romanek was originally hired to direct, but left due to creative differences. Joe Johnston arrived as his replacement. Though initially budgeted at $85 million, it blossomed to nearly twice that cost by the time production finished. The film was then cut down by 30 minutes, which meant Danny Elfman's score had to be totally reworked. The result of all this drama? Former Universal Pictures head Ron Meyer called it one of the worst movies they had ever made, and everybody decided to forget it had ever existed. David Cronenberg films aren't for everyone, so it's not particularly surprising that he's not exactly the king of the box office smash. The Fly remains one of his most profitable films, but most of his other projects haven't fared nearly as well. Case in point, Cronenberg's 2022 film Crimes of the Future, which took in a mere $4.5 million globally on a $27 million budget. A pretty typical Cronenberg film in terms of the themes it explores, the movie was generally well received by critics. Veteran Cronenberg collaborator Viggo Mortensen plays Saul, a man who holds the ability to grow totally new organs. Saul and his partner Caprice take advantage of his condition in their work as performance artists. It's certainly not the most grotesque of Cronenberg's films. Even so, Crimes of the Future clearly didn't resonate with audiences. And while the movie's low box office performance isn't unique in Cronenberg's filmography, the fact that it was also one of his highest budget films means it can be safely counted as a straight-up flop. Horror movie remakes are a contentious topic among cinephiles, and more often than not, they're not received especially well. Take Gus Van Sant's 1998 remake of Psycho, for example, an infamous horror dud. It's a pretty ballsy move to remake what is often regarded as the most influential horror film of all time, but not everyone was convinced. The biggest criticism of Psycho centers on the fact that it is basically a shot-for-shot remake of the original, which is absolutely true. Much has also been said about the casting, as rather unexpectedly, Vince Vaughn was cast to play Norman Bates. But a more appropriate star probably wouldn't have helped. Audiences at the time weren't sold on Van Sant's experiment, and it grossed $37 million globally on a $60 million budget. God knows what Hitchcock would have said. 2016's A Cure for Wellness was a moderately pricey horror film that swung for the fences and missed. Directed by Gore Verbinski, the film follows a young stockbroker who is sent to fetch his boss from a wellness center in the Alps. The spooky old building is not what it seems, of course, and he soon finds it nearly impossible to leave. Despite its intriguing premise, A Cure for Wellness wasn't able to turn a profit, grossing only $26 million globally on a $40 million budget. Though $40 million might not seem like a huge number when you consider the price tag on blockbuster films these days, it is a pretty hefty budget when it comes to horror, a genre that has historically produced inexpensive content. Apparently, this just wasn't the time for theatrical gothic horror, as Crimson Peak had also disappointed at the box office the year before. It also didn't help that Get Out, one of the most successful horror films of the last decade, opened just a week after A Cure for Wellness. It would seem the world simply wasn't ready for a film that features Mia Goth taking a bath with eels. In recent years, Event Horizon has become something of a cult classic. At the time of its release, however, audiences didn't much care for it. Directed by Paul W.S. Anderson, Event Horizon is a sci-fi horror film that is equal parts strange and disturbing. Sam Neill plays William Weir, the creator of a spaceship called the Event Horizon that mysteriously disappears and then reappears in orbit around Neptune. Weir joins Captain Miller and his crew as they investigate the ship, unaware of the horrors that await them.
Reality is much, much worse.
This is a more gruesome movie than you might think, too. Sci-fi horror isn't always the goriest of genres, but Event Horizon turns that assumption on its head. By far, the scariest scene in the film involves the team recovering footage that depicts what happened to the Event Horizon's crew, and, well, let's just say we can't show it here. As the legend goes, the scene was actually more brutal to begin with, but had to be cut for the theatrical release. Still, it seems you can't draw a crowd with gore, because this $60 million movie only grossed $26 million at the domestic box office, and it failed to recoup the rest of the budget internationally. Out of all the filmmakers working today, Uwe Boll might be the one most known for consistently putting out flops. The German filmmaker rose to infamy crafting video game adaptations such as House of the Dead and Far Cry, and almost all of his films have been critically panned box office failures. His biggest flop thus far is the 2005 film BloodRayne, which grossed an abysmal $3.6 million globally against a $25 million budget. Based on the video game of the same name, the movie follows Rain, a human-vampire hybrid who intends to kill her vampiric father. The film's financial failure was due, in part, to a botched release strategy. After going into business with Billy Zane, who also starred in the film, Boll was promised that the film would screen in 2,000 theaters. However, it was reported that BloodRayne was only sent to 985 screens, some of which never even screened it. But even if the release hadn't been fumbled, it's unlikely the film would have been a rousing success. Screenwriter Guinevere Turner has said that Boll is a nightmare to work with, pointed out that he scrapped 80% of her script, and described it as the worst film ever made. The failure of BloodRayne is far from an anomaly for Boll. His other 2005 film, Alone in the Dark, grossed $12.6 million globally on a $20 million budget, and is also often considered one of the worst movies ever made. How's that for Flop Central? Jamie Lee Curtis may be an iconic final girl, but that doesn't mean every horror film she stars in will be a guaranteed success. One of the biggest flops of Curtis's career was 1999's Virus, which, for the most part, has been totally forgotten by pretty much everyone. With a $75 million budget, Virus only scared up $30 million at the box office. Here's the lowdown. Robert Everton is a tugboat commander who comes across an abandoned vessel that could be salvaged for a hefty profit. Although they're caught in a typhoon, Everton and his crew decide to board the vessel and investigate. What do they find? Aliens.
You don't recognize me. What's wrong?
It's not too hard to guess why Virus performed so poorly at the box office. It's a truly terrible movie. Roger Ebert hated it more than almost any other film he ever reviewed, and Jamie Lee Curtis has nothing good to say about it either. In 2003, she told IGN, "Virus is so bad that it's shocking. That would be the all-time piece of 2007's The Invasion is one of the most ill-fated remakes of the 21st century, grossing only $40 million at the global box office on a whopping budget of $80 million. The fourth adaptation of the 1954 book, The Body Snatchers, The Invasion attempts to stylishly illustrate the particular problems of the 2000s, with little success. The film stars Nicole Kidman as Carol Bonnell, a psychiatrist living in Washington, D.C. After a space shuttle crashes into the Earth, Carol notices that everyone around her seems to have turned into emotionless drones. Though the film was originally pitched as a straight remake, David Kojanek wrote a script that was meant to take the story in a new direction, hence the shortened title. The studio was unhappy with the first cut of the film, however, and hired the Wachowskis to rewrite the script. V for Vendetta filmmaker James McTeague was later brought in to direct reshoots. The resulting film doesn't add anything fresh to this well-worn story, despite everyone's best efforts. The constant references to the Iraq War are both repetitive and uninspired, and poor Kidman does her best with a script that lacks any emotional logic. The 2000 film Supernova endured a long road to the big screen, a process that may be to blame for the movie's financial failure. The film follows the crew of a medical ship in the 22nd century who answers a distress call from a distant galaxy. Their rescue mission turns dangerous when they encounter alien technology, forcing them to contend with the mysterious intentions of the man they rescued.
There's no opportunity here, and there is no us.
Walter Hill, credited under the pseudonym of Thomas Lee, directed the first cut. He eventually disowned the film. The budget was slashed and Hill quit, so MGM tapped Jack's shoulder. who'd previously been in contention to direct, to oversee reshoots and edits. MGM executives, also displeased with Shoulder's cut, asked Hill to return. But when they refused Hill's proposal for reshoots, Hill quit a second time. Finally, Francis Ford Coppola was hired to re-edit the film, resulting in the final cut we see today. Coppola made a number of strange editing choices, including digitally replacing actors' heads during a sex scene. That didn't much help things. In the end, Supernova grossed only $14 million at the domestic box office against a staggering $90 million budget. 1998's Sphere was a sci-fi thriller that didn't offer much new to the genre. Dustin Hoffman stars as Norman Goodman, a psychologist who authored a government report detailing how to deal with the arrival of aliens. When a spaceship is discovered under the ocean, Goodman's plan is put into action, and he and his team are sent to investigate. Underwater mischief ensues, and the team discovers something that changes their understanding of time and space. Critics at the time noted that themes explored in the film have been better executed by other side projects, while the script isn't especially coherent. It's a shame, really, because with a stellar cast and intriguing concept, a better script might have helped along a truly great film. Audiences were as underwhelmed with the film as critics, however, and the movie topped out at $50 million at the international box office on a budget of $73 million. Big swings in sci-fi tend to fall the hardest, and Sphere just couldn't hack it in the majors.